Aurora City leaders stay quiet on Chief Wilson's future.
Can we get any sort of comment on just Chief Wilson, resignation, any of that?
I'm not going to know. It's really a matter for the city manager and our form of government. Thanks, appreciate it.
But don't deny she's on her way out. Denver 7 Investigates continues pushing for answers.
Plus, a section of seats catch fire at Empower Field.
Yeah, there's a fire in the stadium. It's over on the east side.
We're live with what may have caused it.
Protesters were met with police force during the 2020 George Floyd protests.
I lost a tooth. It was traumatizing.
2 years later, a case here in Denver could have national implications.
You always have to find a balance between kind of the due process and crime control.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight at 6. I'm Ann Trujillo.
And I'm Bayan Wang. Thanks for joining us. Aurora Police Chief Vanessa Wilson is on her way out, but city leaders are still not confirming it or denying it.
Sources maintain the chief is gone. Well, Denver 7 Investigates Jennifer Kovaleski broke the story last night at 10 and joins us with new developments tonight. Jen, we've learned that Chief Wilson now has a lawyer representing her.
And Brian, yes, that attorney we're told was hired before this all played out. And here's the bottom line. Multiple high-ranking sources maintain the chief is out. As we were first to report last night, the details of her exit remain fluid, but multiple credible sources continue to say she's gone. Wilson's attorney says the chief has no plans to retire or resign, despite the city manager's suggestion.
And as of last Friday, outside counsel said there was no intention to terminate Chief Wilson, no intention to push her out at all. And then on Monday, the city manager called Chief Wilson. He called her, insisted on having a Zoom meeting with her on Monday, and said, I want to talk about an exit strategy.
It's fair to say the city manager is trying to force her out.
Well, I think it's several people, but certainly when you ask somebody for an exit strategy, it does appear that there's a big problem.
We're told Chief Wilson is out of the country on vacation, and her attorney believes the move was calculated. We asked Mayor Mike Kaufman about her leaving the department today. He had no comment. Aurora's city manager has the final say on if the chief stays or goes. And again, our multiple sources maintain Chief Wilson is out. Now, there is a possibility of a legal battle brewing. Now, we asked her attorney specifically, how can she survive this, or can she survive this? She couldn't specifically answer that question, but said that city leadership is making it very difficult for the police chief to do her job.
We know you'll stay on top of this, Jen. Thank you for that. And you can find Jen's story along with a history of Wilson's time as chief, and you'll find it right now on thedenverchannel.com.
All right, black smoke billowed from the Empower Field at Mile High today, and no, it wasn't the Broncos announcing a new defined owner. Instead, a fire torched a section of seats, leaving a charred, melted mess in the club level. Denver 7's Ivan Rodriguez joins us live tonight. Ivan, smoke could be seen for miles across the metro.
And right now we're standing on the north side of Empower Field. Right behind me, we had seen a large fire department presence, firefighters going in and out of the stadium. The fire's been out now for a couple of hours, but take a look at some of these images from earlier this afternoon. You can really see that smoke looking and sort of leaving Empower Field. Denver Fire tells me the fire started around 2:15. The stadium was empty, but there was an event on the second level involving about 100 people. They were able to safely leave the area. Once fire crews entered the stadium, they found a fire burning in the suite area on level 4 and in the seating area on level 3. Denver Fire says the plastic seats produced a dark smoke due to the petroleum they're made of. Still, there's no indication of what started the fire. Once I arrived, I spoke with one man who was visiting from Delaware. He says he was on a tour visiting the stadium for the first time when the fire started.
I just came here for vacation, and today was my day to see the Broncos Stadium. About halfway through, there was a fire. We had to evacuate. Just smoke took over the entire field from the press box we were in. It was insane. At first, it started off with like one seat on fire, and then it just took off. It was crazy.
In total, the fire burned about 1,000 square feet, but the big question on the minds of fire investigators is how this fire even started. Live at Empower Field, Ivan Rodriguez, Denver 7.
All right, Ivan, thank you. Students at Northeast Early College in Denver's Montbello neighborhood walked out today over how they say sexual assault allegations are being handled at their school. They say school leadership is letting harassment go unpunished.
It starts with like harassment unnecessary attention or unwanted attention, unwanted physical contact, things like that. And it just gets bigger and bigger until eventually somebody is sexually assaulted. And I feel like we need to change the smaller things and lead up to the bigger things that we want to change.
Now, the students walked to City Council President Stacey Gilmore's office. They were then notified their school is actually in Councilmember Herndon's district. And Denver police confirmed there have been assaults reported at the school. The school sent a letter to parents yesterday saying they hear the complaints of students and agree something needs to change.
Douglas County's new superintendent is aware of how divisive the district has become. Today, she spoke with Denver 7's Nicole Brady to address how she plans to bring people together.
How do you get to work and stay focused when this other stuff is going on?
I have to talk to everyone, and I've already started doing that. I want to make sure that I talk to people on both sides of that issue. I really want to be talking to, and I have already started talking to, people who don't agree with the majority board, as well as people who do.
Kane is coming from a charter school environment, but she says she is focused on making sure all kids could get ahead no matter what school they go to. You can watch more on Nicole's sit down with Aaron Kane tomorrow morning on Denver 7 News starting at 5 a.m.
Colorado families are one step closer to having access to universal pre-K. Today, the State House advanced legislation on a second reading, and the bill will be up for one final reading. It would provide 10 hours per week of free preschool for every Colorado child starting in the year 2023, or the school year 2023, I should say. The bill also establishes the Department of Early Childhood to help families navigate the child care process.
The city of Denver has paid out millions in settlements for police conduct during the 2020 George Floyd protests, but now a case in federal court will determine if that response was constitutional. Here's Denver 7's Micah Smith.
In the summer of 2020, while demanding justice for George Floyd and Elijah McClain, Lindsay Minter says she was hit in the face with a projectile.
I lost a tooth. It was traumatizing. I hadn't done anything wrong. I had been on the sidewalk the whole time. I hadn't violated any street laws.
Minter is one of dozens of protesters who say while demonstrating peacefully, they were met with police brutality in Denver. This has resulted in dozens of lawsuits, and one federal case in particular involving 12 George Floyd protesters and Denver police officers could set a new federal precedent for these cases.
This is the first time that a jury of our peers is going to judge whether the police response during the George Floyd protests here in Denver, which was representative of the police response across the country, was appropriate and constitutional.
Attorney Andy McNulty has been following the case closely after 3 weeks of testimonies from police officers, Denver's police chief, and the city's independent monitor. McNulty says one testimony stands out the most.
One of the most key moments in the entire trial was the testimony of Nick Mitchell, the independent monitor, and talking about these interviews he did of police officers who told him that they were not prepared at all for these protests to erupt.
As we get more information and society changes, we have to update police officer training as well to align with the society's goals.
MSU Associate Criminal Justice Professor Stacey Hervey says as society changes, officers' training needs to evolve and should include teaching officers how to strike a balance between due process and crime control.
Obviously, people have the right to protest in this country. It's one of the greatest things about this country. But I think when you're really looking at protesting, when does protesting step over the line into destroying the rights of others?
We have our First Amendment rights.
And Minter says no matter what side of the aisle you're on, the jury's decision will have nationwide implications for how and when that right is exercised. Reporting in Denver, Micah Smith, Denver 7.
All right, Micah, thank you. The plaintiffs finished their closing arguments today. The city will present its case next week.
We haven't talked about COVID in a while, and not because it's gone away, but because cases have generally been really low. For the first time since the Omicron surge in January, there has been a week-over-week increase in new infections. State health officials reported 2,488 new cases in the week ending on Sunday. That's up from the 1,598 cases the previous week. And to put that in perspective here, last week's numbers were similar to that in June of 2021, which was a relatively low period of the pandemic. If cases do rise, it could be hard for the government to supply free testing, treatment, and vaccines. The White House said on Monday that it is essentially out of COVID relief funding. The administration is now requesting $22.5 billion in funding from Congress.
So these funds, the $22.5 billion that we requested from Congress, is critical to our ability to have no disruptions in the short-term plan, the short-term preparedness efforts to keep people safe while we're facing what may be coming our way next. Again, it's about preparedness and public health to keep people safe. It's about having the tests, the treatments, and yes, the vaccines necessary so that everybody has all the tools that they need to not just survive, but thrive through this pandemic.
The White House says there's not much left of the $1.9 trillion of the American Rescue Plan. About $250 billion is allocated for cities and states. And the Denver Post did a roundup of municipalities to see how they would spend the money. Most would be put toward broadband services and other infrastructure projects.
A silent killer in Colorado.
I lose so many people on a monthly basis, I can't even tell you.
Colorado has a plan to save lives.
If stigma is not ripped out of the scene, we don't stand a chance.
A nice mild evening here across the Front Range with temperatures in the 50s and 60s, but a huge warm-up coming our way going into the weekend. I'll have your forecast.
And the Pios begin their quest for a 9th national championship. We'll take you live to northern Colorado 45 minutes before the puck drops.